Hey, good to see you. Thanks for coming. This is another episode of Wireframe brought to you by Design Systems House. I'm your host, Donnie D'Amato, and today we're going to be talking about 14,605 side quests. Yes, that's a lot of side quests. And in order to help me get through some of these side quests, I have a very special guest. It's Jacob Miller. Jacob, thank you so much for being on the show today. Let the folks at home know who you are.
Dude, I'm excited to be on this. Hello, everyone. Hello. I am Jacob Miller. I was previously over at Figma for about 5 years, overlooking some of the things you may have used, variables being one of the most kind of famous streams that I worked on and led over there at Figma. Had a long history inside of design systems. I was at Atlassian before that, looking after their design systems team. And yeah, I just quit Figma about a year ago now to work on my own design tool. That's who I am. Yeah, back to you, Donnie.
Super. All right. Well, thanks. Yeah, I mean that's one of the things that was like a little bit shocking to me was leaving Figma, and this is something that when I heard you leave, and I've seen other folks that I know also leave. You question. You go, why would you ever? And granted, you kind of already mentioned a little tidbit about that because 5 years, it's a long time to be in a tech place. I mean, just generally speaking, right? I mean, I know lots of people that jump around, 2, 3 years and that's it, but 5 years is a long time. So what was your reason or reasons for, leaving Figma and going into the next thing?
I think there were really two things. The first was when I joined Figma, I had a chance to speak at the first config, and that was before I actually joined up with Figma itself. But I was talking to some of their leaders there, Shokumoto, who is one of their kind of VPs of product. And what I said was, hey, look, I want to join Figma, and I want to ship 3 things: variables, slots, and component properties. I was just like, these are the things that are missing from the product that will really bring it so that it actually has some equivalency with code. And they're the things that I want to join on the product side to lead and launch. All those things launched. I got through the checklist finally. And there was an element of like, look, there's more things to do here. There's more things on the backlog, but I achieved what I set out to do. The other aspect, though, was during my time there, one of the things that I saw, because I got a chance to lead Figma's first prompt to design feature, that was their first draft feature. When we were doing that, I was looking at approaches for doing prompt to design. One of them was what we ended up going with, which is basically use a large language model to recombine existing design elements to build them out and retheme them. The problem with that is it's pretty restrictive in what it can do. It is very constrained, which can be a good thing as well. It means that you're going to know it's going to use the right components. You're going to know the output is going to be solid. But the issue is that it's limited by the amount of inputs that go into it. And the other thing is that large language models have issues on the design side, to say the least. Yeah. I mean, we've all seen that, like the whole like purple gradient thing that's going on. But there's another type of AI model that's out there, which is diffusion models. And diffusion models are what you've seen from things like Stable Diffusion or Midjourney or Google Nano Banana. And those are much more open-ended. Like they do some crazy things. And I had this like inkling of an idea when we were first doing the stream that I wonder if diffusion models will eventually get good enough to do UI design. And I was just seeing this like trend kind of climbing upwards of them getting better and better and better and better. And I really wanted to take a bet to actually bet on these models because they're just so open-ended and they're so creative. And so I was just like, look, I'm going to leave Figma. I've been there for 5 years. I set out what I achieved to do. It's time for me to go and do my own thing. I've always wanted to be a founder. And so that's the main reason I left. It was just like, look, I'm going to kill myself if I don't try this. And so I felt that I could do it faster and hopefully better outside of Figma. And that's the reason why it took off from there. I'm still great friends with everyone over there. Mad respect for Figma. I still use it on a very regular basis. I don't think it's a tool that is going away anytime soon. But it was just really to pursue this dream for me.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because we had oh my goodness, Christine Valore on the show. It was last week, I
For
believe.
moon learning, yeah.
Yeah, moon learning, exactly. And she was talking about how it was important to use the canvas for her, right? Because you have all these folks out there that are saying, "Oh, Figma's gone, dead, whatever you want to call it. You know, it's not useful anymore." And she was basically saying, "No, it's very useful." And admittedly, when you think about it in the way of it being the plan, right? It's the same as you would plan for, the regular models out there, or the regular workflows of code and things of that nature, where I need to create a plan, a specification, whatever you want to call it, to get started. You don't want to just prompt into the wind and try to get started that way. You're not going to get good results because you have no plan. So being able to have a canvas allows you to create the plan and therefore have some better results. So definitely a line there. Now, the diffusion models is really interesting to me because, admittedly, haven't done a lot of work in diffusion models, or even I think I've probably played with them without even knowing about it. Because for me, I would like to think that I know some about AI, but I also couldn't tell you one AI from another one if you didn't put any labels on them, right? And I'm sure that there's like, ones for images that work better for images, ones that work better for code, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm not, I guess, consciously paying attention to that necessarily. And it's really interesting that it seems that you have, in particular, saying that, hey, maybe these general models or even the code models aren't the right direction to be taking for UI design. So tell me about maybe the exploration into this inkling, this light bulb that started, and how you went from there.
Yeah, I think there's two things there. I mean, you mentioned the canvas, which I think is such an important part of this,
Mm-hmm.
because if you're just starting with, a large language model, whether that's like ChatGPT or Claude, and you're typing something into it, it's going to give you a singular result, and that is your starting point. But I think what we as designers often do is we explore 20 different approaches all at once, and that in particular is something that I think the canvas is really good for. It allows for that visual exploration, not only for you yourself as a creator, but also for teams to jump in and explore and review and comment and do that sort of thing. What I was seeing was that these large language models were only creating singular options, and that they were creating them too slowly to really create that explorative experience. So for me, the question was, okay, well, how can I equip this design canvas that allows for prompt design to be explored as quickly as possible? Now, I think there's a few other options that are out there, like Paper Design is one of them that's doing this, where they have like this canvas that is LLM equipped. But in the other aspect, that is my whole bet, is that large language models are inherently the wrong model for the job. And there's a few reasons why. One is large language models are inherently blind.
Mm-hmm.
When they are creating a design, they are representing a design through code. They're writing code out via HTML, JavaScript, CSS, and then the browser opens it and you kind of see what it's actually arrived on. One of the issues with them, though, is that they're trained to write consistent code. This makes total sense if you want to write like a billing function. You want it to be consistent. You don't want a billing function to go and do something creative with how it's actually tallying up and tokenizing things. But for design, you want a little bit more creativity. And so when they're trained for consistent code, what you end up getting is consistent design as well. And I was trying to break out of that mold a little bit. What I found when I was working over at Figma, especially on like Figma Make, was there were two ways to really use Figma Make. One is you could provide, your design system components, a design MD, a set of custom guidelines for it, or you could provide a design in Figma to build from. And early on, what we found was that using a large language model to build with all of your tools and components and everything had worse results than building from just a single design without any other resources. And so I just had in my mind, well, okay, how can we get to this image as quickly as possible in a way that's really creative? And diffusion models we've seen are really good at something known as style transfer.
Hmm.
What that is, you've seen this thing of like, hey, take a photo of yourself and turn it into a Studio Ghibli character, for
Sure.
instance.
Yeah.
In the same way, you can take a wireframe of something and say, hey, represent this in GoDaddy's design language,
Right.
or represent this in Atlassian's design language, or represent this in any other brand system that's out there. And it does a really good job with the modern ones that are out there. So this bet on diffusion and why I wanted a diffusion equipped canvas was really just to allow you to explore as many options as possible, as creatively as possible within not only your own design systems, but with other design systems as well. And so that was really the bet on it. I just think that it is inherently a more apt model for what designers do. It's creative. It understands things like visual spacing, color usage, as well as all the other things that go into design, rather than LLMs, which are approaching it in more of a blind state. So that's why diffusion models. The downside, because there are always trade-offs and downsides, is that the output is images rather than LLMs, which output code.
Right.
And so because of that, there's a final build step at the end. But that's the same thing that you would have inside of Figma when you're using Figma, where you design something first and then you hand it off to an engineer to actually build that out. So that is the whole kind of bet and ethos behind this.
Wow, that's fascinating. I'm already my gears are turning in the head. You can see them; they're definitely turning right now. And I say that specifically because in the book, in Ms. On Mode, the book that I wrote toward the end, I talk about the use of AI with design tokens, and it's not what everyone's been, I guess, assuming to be doing, which is effectively, oh, let me generate a design token with AI. Like you don't want that. You want a very stable amount of tokens, and you want that to be consistent across, platforms and teams and organizations. You don't want that to just automatically generate out of nothing. The more important thing is to have variations of the values to express different things. Now, what most people are doing is basically light and dark mode. That's basically it. That's where they end, and that's all we end up getting with. But if you take it to the absolute limit, you get into this problem that Nate Baldwin's actually talked about, which is multidimensional modes, right? Where you have all of these different influences that are trying to vie for attention for this particular color that you're playing with, the topography value or whatever it is. And when you have so many different values that are trying to get, influences trying to end up at a value, that's very hard for a single person or even really a team to finally decide on. So having some sort of AI system that basically is able to take in all those influences, whether it be the brand or the culture or the system preference or the user preference or the time of day or what this person wants in this moment right now. All of those influences to come down to a single value. A business might not necessarily see at the surface going, oh, we clearly need that because it's too variable, it's too hard to wrap your head around. But a user goes, oh my god, this is made specifically for me. It is hyper inclusive design in that way. So what I talk about in here is the ability to go through all those permutations and be able to have what I called a large expression model, right? All the expressions are built inside of this model such that when some kind of influences are trying to be, dial in a little bit, you get the most appropriate thing for that person. And you could, again, change those temperatures and be like, I want a little bit more brand here, or I want a little bit less of the culture part in here, or maybe I need more because we're getting, some signals in another direction. So I never really experimented to see what that actually looks like for the book in honesty, but listening about this diffusion model direction, about how diffusion models, as you're explaining them to me, are more visually aware, that's effectively what I'm trying to do with an expression, because at the end of the day, right, it's kind of what you're talking about, where you have the wireframe. The wireframe is the flow. That's not changing. That's what the business needs or the user needs. That can't change. But between, Visa or MasterCard or American Express, you're going to get the same sort of flow and layout. But the expression, the thing that we're showing to the user, that will change to let them know that, oh, you are on MasterCard now, or you are now in dark mode now, or all that other stuff. That's just an expression. And that's effectively, it sounds like, if we can, you know, pull out a little bit of what the diffusion model is doing to get it so that it doesn't have the image thing. I think this is probably the thing that you're kind of like battling a little bit, because you've already identified and you said diffusion models are visual. That's the model we should be using if we're going to be talking visually. But trying to distill that into a system is the challenge. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think I'm going to make two separate points here.
Sure.
One is for multi-dimensional theming.
Yeah.
I think this is something that we found on the design system side as like DS experts. It can be really hard to do that effectively.
Right.
And the combinatoric explosion that happens when you have those multidimensional themes increases very, very quickly.
Correct.
And that is something that's really hard to handle, because oftentimes you'll have, multiple brands for your teams. So for example, like if you're at Microsoft, you're going to have an Excel or a Word or a PowerPoint set of themes in addition to light mode and dark mode. But then on top of that, you may also want something like, well, hey, we actually want a Christmas mode in here because the holidays are coming up and we kind of want to shift things around a little bit. When you have something like that, you are purposefully saying, I actually want to diverge slightly from our brand system a little bit and incorporate the theme of this holiday into it while still being visually recognizable. And because of that, you have added yet another access to your multidimensional theming aspect. And that is really hard to control from a mathematical standpoint. Mm-hmm. Colors are very hard to quantify with math. But one of the interesting things about diffusion models is that for them, it's actually really easy. Because for them, they are being trained on, millions of examples of designs and art and brands and billboards and posters and all of these other elements that are going into its knowledge base and corpus of, hey, how should colors work together? Right. How should we be able to preserve brand? Oh, I'm going to go reference this 1950s Coca-Cola ad for Christmas that was able to blend the Coca-Cola red and that Christmas green together, even though green is outside of that design system. Right. And so one of the interesting things is that as long as you have a good token taxonomy, you can take in an image as an input and map the colors from that image to your token taxonomy in a really effective way. So now what you're doing is, instead of trying to create your multidimensional array up front with a bunch of math to determine if it's on brand or not, which is really hard to do, the only thing that you're doing is you're just rendering an image and saying, hey, give me a Christmas mode of our theme. And it'll be like, sure, here you go. Boom, boom, here it is. Pull that image, put it into an LLM to analyze and extract all the colors out of it. You've got your mode. Suddenly, the huge combinatoric explosion issue turns into, oh, just go and render images of each of the pages. We'll pull those modes in. Cool, it's aligned.
Beautiful. Yeah. No, it's 100% what I envisioned for sure, in terms of what this is. Because again, like looking at, the popular LLMs out there, and I'm like, they're not made for this. We're seeing the complaints. Right. I was in the design system Slack earlier today, and there was a guy in there complaining about how every time that they would try to, talk to the LLM to get something on system, it would just make up some stuff every single time. Right. And, we're seeing this all over the place about, this maybe not being the right tool for the job that we're looking for, even though we are seeing also successes, right? We're seeing successes like Kalig had a whole large post about how he's been able to make components fairly accurately and high quality with a single prompt. So there's successes in there, but by and large, what I'm seeing is very much a lot of fighting, even though you get a lot of people saying that design systems are the most important thing to keep things consistent, but it seems like no one's able to keep it consistent even though, right? So, like in the work that you're doing with Diff UI, is that how you pronounce it also? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So with Diff UI, is the special secret sauce basically the diffusion to the system? Is that basically what we're talking about here?
Yeah, I mean, so going to like the LLM side where people are having issues with consistency, I think one of the main reasons for that is the context window problem.
Mm,
Design systems are huge, and
yeah.
especially at like an enterprise scale, and especially if you have multiple teams that are all contributing to it, you often have a design system that has hundreds of components in it. I've seen token schemas that are around 5,000 in length
Oh God, yeah.
as like a pretty common thing on the upper end of this,
Yeah.
especially for multidimensional theming. And because of that, for these LLMs, you start overloading their context window with all of your components, your tokens, your design MD, and additional rules in there. And one of the curious things about them is the more rules that you have inside of the context window, the more likely it is to ignore any single rule.
Mm,
And that is just because they're trained for consistency. So even though they're in the context window, at the end of the day, it may just be like, oh, I forgot that there's a button inside of here in the context. I'm just going to go and make a tailwind button instead because it's
mhm.
easier. It knows how to do that. It aligns towards consistency.
Yeah.
With diffusion, I don't think you really have that problem. It's a very, very different type of model. And so one of the things that I found is that instead of starting with your tokens, your components, and all these other things, what I get you to do, at least inside of Diff UI, is you just post in some screenshots. I can start from a single screenshot of your site and build another page in that exact visual language.
Yeah.
And oftentimes it is more compliant with a single screen than it is if you have your entire design system loaded up into the context window. Now, LLMs are getting better at that over time,
Mhm.
but I think it shows that you're starting with a back foot disadvantage with those large language models versus a system that you can just paste it in a single screenshot in. The other thing, though, is that I think brands are visual, and I think that
Yeah.
brands end up trying to pursue visual recognizability as
Mhm.
the most important thing rather than dogmatic compliance. I think that if you look at the purpose of design systems, I think it's really twofold. One is to accelerate development and implementation of things inside of your brand language. And the other is to keep consistency and visual recognizability of your brand.
Right.
That first, I think, has already been solved. But on that second one, I think we can actually go a little bit more creative in what we're doing now with the tools that are available because of how fast we can move. So I think that by pasting in screenshots and saying, hey, here's the corpus of my entire app as far as screenshots go and extract the design system, build pages in this style. You can also begin to tweak that for more fun and creative things, which I think we already see for like billboards and marketing pages. But I just want a web that's more tailored for things.
Yeah.
I think that we often end up relying on overly boring kind of like SaaS app enterprisey things, which, can be great sometimes, but also when you find something that is crafted from a design language point of view that is still on brand, those are the things that I think create the wow moments for a lot of users. And I think that's what is missing in a lot of LLM-based approaches. So hopefully this allows you to kind of pursue that more creative aspect while still maintaining that brand.
Yeah, I mean, I could see a world where having all those different explorations available to you that are aligned to the brand's expectations or the organization's expectations, right? That can uncover some directions that you haven't considered, right? And now with that, I think there's some caution in there, right? Because it's entirely possible that maybe you go too far in the wrong direction, right? And we've seen some of this stuff, right? Where people are trying to be novel and cute and clever is a word that's been told on the show a little bit, where it doesn't land like you want it to, right? Especially from very creative people who want to, not do the SaaS thing, right? It's like, oh, okay, I've already seen the SaaS so many different times. Well, there's sort of a reason why you've seen it so many times. It's because it's working, But the other flip side of that is well, now you look like every other SaaS. So, where's the dial that goes to, look, this is still to my expectation, but this is also still unique enough for me to show myself as a different player in the game. So how do you balance that?
Yeah, so I think this goes back to like what the role of a designer is, especially in the current modern world,
Mm,
which designers are still a part of the process. And I think for a lot of us, we've changed our roles as people that are creating frames inside of Figma on a daily basis to being more director level design managers. And in that role, one of the most important things is having taste and being able to say, no, this isn't a part of what we want to ship, or yes, this is what we want to ship. The question is, how can we get you to that point, that decision point, as quickly as possible? Now, in terms of like where that dial is, I think this is one of the fun things about diffusion and why I think a lot of tools are going to start gravitating towards this. And that is that diffusion is much cheaper as well as much faster than large language models.
mm,
So the advantage of that means that for one option on the large language model design side, you can render 4 options on the diffusion side. And the advantage of that is then you can go through those 4 options and say, yes, no, no, yes. And then you say, okay, let's take the ones that were yeses, move them over here and keep iterating and exploring off of those ones. So in terms of where the dial is, I actually, whenever you generate something based off of a prompt, at least in Diff UI, I purposefully try and keep that first option as close as possible to your prompt, as close as possible to your brand. Every option after that, I turn the temperature up just a little bit.
right.
A little bit more divergence, a little bit more divergence. And I think what you find is that through that, you get more optionality of just like, okay, this first one is a little bit too boring. Let's go to the second one. Oh, it did something fun. I really like that. I'm going to pull that thing that I liked out as another aspect and
Mm.
maybe recombine it with an option for number 3 or 4. It's that exploration phase that I think is really important, especially as you're taking on these roles as design directors. So I think that's really like what it is at the end of the day. It's you provide more optionality with higher temperature.
Yeah.
Now that's if you're in the role also as like somebody with an established brand. On the other side, going back to the side quests thing, I think everybody has these side quests that are out there right now where they're creating new and interesting things.
Right.
But there's so many things that are out there that you need to be visually recognizable or have that visual wow moment when you're launching something to get even that first eyeball on it.
Right.
I think the cool thing about being able to turn that temperature dial up even further is saying, well, hey, what is going to be divergent from what I'm asking for that can surprise me that I'll actually really like and that fits in with what I'm going for. So I think if you're trying to create like a new brand, it's an even better experience to start with an image first. And you don't have to use like the tool that I'm creating. I'd recommend that you go into Nano Banana or go to GPT Image 2 and just create these things and just see like, hey, what will it come up with for inspiration? So I think they're really creative for that inspiration stage.
That's actually really great insight or advice, because I actually do struggle myself with getting inspiration for a particular design that I want to go for. So, like as an example, for Wireframe, just the branding of this site in particular, I there is a certain brand that's to it, but I've always felt like it could be a little bit more, especially the website. I've always felt like, oh, there's got to be something else that I could be doing here that makes it more interesting or engaging, or because it does. Very admittedly, when I visit, I'm like, this is missing something, and I don't know what it is. And you try stuff, and you give this a shot and whatever, and it just doesn't like land right. But to be able to just go ahead and grab a screenshot and be like, hey, Nano Banana, what is this missing? Like, let's go through some iterations and have some ideas about what I might want to do with this, and be like, oh, okay, yeah, that could be something there. I think is really great insight. Um, wow,
I
yeah,
think I also struggled quite a bit with like having inspo for design. And I think
yeah,
this is a really common thing among technical designers,
mm-hmm,
which a lot of times for those of us in design systems, a lot of us are.
right,
We're gravitated to design systems because of the technical aspect of it. And we end up being more of these like hybrids between like design and eng, which means we're not pushing our skills as much on the visual creativity side. I found myself, even when I was at Figma 2 years ago, I was using Flux, which was another image model,
mm,
to give me ideas for, hey, how should the layout of something look? how should the theming look? What colors should I use? And they were terrible at the time in terms of text rendering. So it would output this like garbled text madness or whatever. A lot of that's been fixed since then. But I would then take those inspirational images that it outputted, and I would actually try and recreate them in Figma as a starting point. And so I found that actually elevated my design capabilities even at that time with those older models.
Yeah.
So I think it can really help us, those of us that are like technical designers, to be more creative and to have more inspiration and to have something that's more unique.
I'm realizing a lot of the reason why I haven't thought of this, and the reason I think I haven't thought of this is because I feel like I've tried that with existing things out there. I remember trying this with Claude Design. I remember going to Claude Design and be like, okay, I want to have a design that's very Great Gatsby or Wizard of Oz, you know, like Emerald City, that kind of, 1920s kind of feel. I want that. And the inspiration that it gave was so flat. Like it just didn't land. I was like, wow, this is so uninspired, right? That I was just kind of like, okay, well, this isn't working. And this isn't all that long ago. I mean, this is, when Claude Design came out, which is hasn't been a year yet, I think, right? So
No,
yeah. So granted, like it was early on in Claude Design, certainly, and maybe it's improved. But from what you're telling me about the diffusion models, they are more equipped to do this sort of visual exploration, right? These visual side quests, so to speak, and have 14 million of them, which is probably going to be a lot of tokens, but whatever. I mean, you do you, right? Yeah, that's fascinating. I do potentially want to move on to another topic, but
hit me. Yeah.
But before we do that, I just want to make sure that we've covered the things that you would like to cover on this particular topic that we're on.
Yeah, what I would say is just like a final thing is that I think a lot of people wrote off diffusion as an option because diffusion was used for like cheeky things like, these Studio Ghibli images. But the other thing is that for a very long time, these models had been trained for consumer level GPUs only. So they were artificially constrained in size because people saw them as more like a fun creative thing rather than an enterprise thing. For the first time, we've had a model that can actually do design, and that got released only 4 months ago. That was GPT Image 2. That was one of the first ones, along with Google Nano Banana, that was a data center grade level one of these. So if you're comparing like apples to oranges here of large language models versus diffusion models, we've only had these diffusion models that are at the size of large language models from a parameter count point of view in the last couple of months. So if you've written them off previously, you've written off much smaller ones, these ChatGPT level 2 ones that are out there. Give them another try because they've gotten so much better in the past few months.
Super. Thanks for that. Okay, awesome. Before we go to the next topic, also, I do see there's a couple of people watching live, so thank you for watching live. If you have a question for Jacob or for me, you can put it in the chat, and I will get to it and ask it live on the show. Now, the thing that I want to talk about now, which is very interesting to me, is being a founder. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I'm technically a founder, but I don't feel like one. Okay. I started Design Systems House in 2023, and I talked about this actually on the show with Dan Moll a few weeks ago. But I don't feel like one. And even in the pre-show, before we talked a little bit, you were talking about you were raising money and stuff like that, and I'm just like wildly petrified of that very, mature adult kind of thing that is effectively saying, I'm going to raise money, I'm going to, build this thing, et cetera, et cetera. And some of that, of course, is because I have too many things. That's another problem that I, of course, have. And you, I think, have focused on this very specific one thing, know exactly, what you're putting your energy into. So can you talk a little bit about basically your experience in being a founder, things that you have learned, the fears, uncertainties, doubts, all kind of just that whole thing that's on that side of it?
Yeah, the first thing that I would say is being a founder is terrifying.
Yeah.
And you have to be ready for that. You are making an explicit choice to give up a steady stream of income. For those of us in the US, that also means you're giving up your health insurance. It means that you are making a bet on your idea that at this point is unproven.
Right.
you're going to have to go out there and either bootstrap, or you're going to have to convince venture capitalists to actually give you money based on that idea. Now, especially if you're a first-time founder, that means that you are an unproven variable. And so they're going to look and they're going to ask you really hard questions of like, hey, you've never done this before. Why should we trust you?
Right.
Why should we give you this money in order to like get this stuff up and going? I've been lucky enough to get at least convince a few people to help me out on those lines. But even still, I'm taking a huge pay cut to do it. I'm taking an existential risk to my future in order to do this. And a lot of times, the hardest thing is not those elements. It's the internal monologue that we all have of self-doubt of, was this the right thing to bet on?
Yeah.
Because I've now been doing this since January. So what is that? I'm 7.5 months in. During that time, you're going to have at least 6 months of that where you're going to have 0 users. You're going to have 0 people telling you, hey, I really like this, or hey, I don't like this. Because you're going to be building out that product, you're going to be raising funds, you're going to be getting to the point where you can launch and you get those first few users. The first 1,000 users is so hard to get.
Yeah. And
your own mental health is going to be the biggest barrier to that. You're going to have those self-doubts being like, hey, I'm not good enough for this, or, you know, I don't have the skills for this. There's too many things or too many ways it can go wrong. You have to really be a rock mentally and be like, no, I'm going to keep going on this. So if you are doing this, the first thing that I would encourage you is set yourself a timeline where no matter what happens during that timeline, the only thing you do is focus on this, and you don't decide to quit or stop or change until you hit that point in time.
Yeah.
Because if you don't carve out that section for you, you're going to have those self-doubts. You're going to want to pivot so much.
Yeah. No, I love that advice. It's really, really solid there. I mean, now the 1,000 users thing, right? The first, do you have 1,000 users right now, or are you?
I think we just hit 2,000 users, in fact, today. So that has been cool to see. And it took me, I posted this online as well around like my user growth numbers. It took me about 3 months to get my first 500 users.
Okay.
After that, it took me a month to get my second 500 users.
Right.
Then it took me 8 days to get my next 500 users.
Okay, so you're getting like this exponential kind of thing happening.
And that's what I mean by that first cohort is the hardest one to get, because those will be people that are trying to bet on a completely unproven product. It's going to be based on either your social clout alone or just random people stumbling across this, which those two things are really hard to facilitate. You have to create a community of regular users early on. And that part is just so hard, but it does increase over time.
So now I'm gonna dive a little bit deeper in this, because trying to get a community is also a big problem that I've had personally. I've had it with Undefined and other things of that nature. So, you know, is there any tips or even just the story of how you were able to grow your community of people? How did that work for you?
Yeah, I think that whatever you're making, it has to be something that people can understand, want, and desire within 15 seconds of seeing it for the first time.
Oh my God, how the fuck? Jacob.
Right. And
oh my God.
for a lot of tools that are out there, that is a really hard proposition.
Yes.
So what I would say is that if you're doing this and you're trying to get that following, try and distill things down to that wow moment or down to that moment of understanding as quickly as possible. Now, luckily for me, I'm building a visual tool. Yeah. This visual tool outputs things that are pretty, and you can see and you can understand that really quickly. And so for me, what I've been doing is I've just been going on to Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and I've been posting reels of me just making stuff. This is another thing that I think a lot of founders forget, which is it's not just about building the product. You, especially as a solo founder, have to do every single role, which means that every single day I am doing financial things, I'm doing security things, I'm doing investment things, I'm doing user growth things, I'm creating content. And on top of all that, I'm building the product.
Right.
It's not just about building the product. That is half of the equation. And if you don't do the other half, your product's going to fail. So that is how I'm approaching this. It's to distill it down as quickly as possible to understand, and it's making sure you focus on that other half as well.
Yeah, I mean that's some of the scary stuff that I think that I'm personally, petrified of. I mean, just like even just talking about, the financials of stuff, right? going through what that particularly means, because again, like I there's a lot of credit I have to give you, certainly, about, up and answering, focusing specifically on this thing from having a stable position at a very large company that's doing a very, very well at the moment, to doing, this new project. And here's the other question I'll have for you too: is any of that stuff, the other half, not the product, but the other half of stuff, what of that was stuff that you had to learn? And I'm sure the answer is everything, but was there anything in particular that was surprising or harder than others, or anything else that's out there? And it's not meant to necessarily scare anyone. I think this is more so to prepare anybody who might have their own idea, and to be like, okay, here's where I gotta get my ducks in a row before I even consider, moving forward. That's kind of the angle that I'm looking at here.
Yeah, I think to your point, it's one of those like everything things.
Yeah.
The thing that I will in particular say is there's a lot of things that are security related or compliance related or tax related, that no matter the experience you have of building products in tech. For me, I've been a designer, I've been a developer, I've been a prototyper, I've been a design manager, I've been a product manager. I've done all this stuff in tech, but there were still so many things that I hadn't done when I was trying to build this out. And a lot of those are, like, for example, I was just doing my SOC 2 security compliance for Diff UI. And it was things like, I was familiar with setting up systems on Linux and locking them down, but it was so much more than that. It was, okay, do you have a documented process where if you have an employee and they have missed their training video timelines, what do you do? There's those questions you're just like, what? I didn't even consider this.
Yeah.
What I would recommend, and this was the most helpful thing for me of staying on track, was actually to hire an AI agent to be your boss. And what I mean by that is there's all these things out there, like Hermes is what I use for this, which it will connect with your email, it will connect with your calendar, it will connect with your product and do all these other connections, and it'll ingest all this data. And what you can tell it is, hey, I am a founder, I'm founding this company, this is the purpose. What do I need to do next? And you'll often be surprised with what it tells you, because it has so much training and knowledge of these things, just like, oh, I didn't even consider that.
Yeah.
You're right, that's what I should be doing. And so it was able to give me, really just like, I just told it, give me a checklist of 3 things that I'm not thinking about every single day to do.
Yeah, that's great.
And then it was like, sweet, now I just have to check these items off the list. And that has been one of the most instrumental things in allowing me to act in this founder role. I mean, for a long time, we had things like startup schools, Y Combinator being like a really common one, that would teach you all these things. But if you're going out and doing stuff on your own, you're not going to have that knowledge. And so having at least something to be there to be an advisor for you around, hey, what's the next step, is really, really helpful. And it just keeps you on track, and it keeps you honest as well.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking about, is about being on track, right? Because, again, the overwhelmed that I am about all the different things that I know that I don't know, that's probably some of the largest things that are keeping me from taking what I do to the next level, right? Is basically like, well, there's a whole bunch of known unknowns. Like I don't know these things, right? I'm sure there's more involved when, running a significant business that I don't know about. I don't even know how to get started with. And I'm worried that once I find out, that I don't want to go down that path, right? There's so much of that doubt that I have in particular, that something like a system like that, that's basically like, we're going to break this down, right? Here are your 3 Jira tickets, so to speak, for the day, right? Like, just knock these 1-pointers, these 2-pointers out, and there's nothing on here that's necessarily a freaking epic other than your business itself, right? It's literally, okay, let's get this done today, let's get this done today, and you do those 3, and then you feel accomplished. You feel like, hey, this is going in a direction. I could see how that could help some of the FUD that I'm having, for sure. Yeah.
And look, I plug my analytics into it as well. And so it can keep me honest about something. It'll be like, hey, user growth today wasn't as good as it has been like the past week or so, you
Mm,
should go make some social content and do that again.
mm,
The other thing is, I think a lot of us end up procrastinating through doing work that we want to do
mhm.
rather than the work that needs to get done. I think the dream that a lot of people have is, oh, I'm going to go quit and make my own company so I can be my own boss.
Oh, goodness.
The reality, though, is that a lot of the work that you're going to do as a solo founder, or even as a co-founder, is going to be work that you don't want to do. It's going to be like, oh, that's boring. I don't want to do that stuff. I want to go like noodle in and nerd out about the stuff that I'm actually building and why I built this company. But those things have to get done. So because of that, it actually keeps you more honest about that and keeps you on track. And if you miss that, it'll yell at you, be like, hey, you didn't do that task yesterday. What happened and why? And so you really have to actually be honest with yourself, as well as just like it provides an accountability partner.
That's amazing. That's actually amazing. Thank you for that insight and that tool. That sounds. I'm going to take a peek at that. Honestly, I really am. Um, that's really cool. Um, what's what's next with what you're working on, or is there something in particular that's we already mentioned about these small little wins that you're talking about in the emails, the dailies, but is there something that's in the future that you're really excited about the next like milestone, I guess is the word I'm looking for. Is there anything that's top of mind for you there?
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest milestone that's been on my mind was what I launched literally 2 days ago, which
Mm,
was like the Teams and Enterprise feature. So I've been like going full in on that, creating folders and organizations and team signups and unified billing and all that stuff. But now that that's out, for me, it's just about growth.
mm,
It, especially as a new product, people just don't trust you at this stage.
right.
I've proven out, at least to me and to the users that I have already, that hey, Diffusion provides coverage for things that are missing that are out there right now. But now we need to convince more people of that. So for me, it's all about hitting those growth numbers. It's about talking to large enterprises. It's about talking to small teams. It's about talking to agencies and basically getting it out there so that they can actually at least try this. Once that happens, and once there is that kind of parabolic growth that you're really hoping for, if I achieve that, my long-term goal is to train my own models.
Mm,
Because I think that, again, diffusion models have been written off for a really, really long time. And so if you can create diffusion models that are tailored to UI and tailored to working with designers, I think that we can create something that is the next generation for how design works that's going to just blow people's minds. I think there's so much untapped potential there. There was this like quote like really early on when I was creating this stuff, which is I think it was just like a tweet, and it was like, I want to create Evangelion interfaces.
oh, okay.
And there's a truth of that. Like part of why I called it Diff UI is there's like a cheeky portmanteau in there of diffusion and FUI, which is like this fantasy user interface.
Oh,
That's like a concept of like user interfaces that are like out of Tron or like out of Minority Report. And
right.
there's these things that are awe-inspiring and cool. They're not necessarily functional in those movies, but they look really, really cool. And I think that the future is these interfaces that are both functional and cool. And by building out these tools, we can get to a level where we're pushing design way higher than it's been for the past few years. I want to get past the Shadsian and Tailwind time of life that we're in right now.
I would
So
also,
that for me
yeah,
is what's next.
I would agree with that as well. Yeah, you can spell it like a mile away, like we could see these AI generated, ads and images and things like that. And talking about these different experiences, right? This fantasy UI stuff. It's reminding me a little bit of the conversation I had with Ann Cantera last week, where she focuses on something called omnimodal design. And what that ends up being is not just like one particular way of interfacing with an experience, but it's actually having a flow of different interfaces as you have a single experience, right? So maybe you go from a typing kind of interaction, but then you are no longer able to type because the baby's crying, and now you need a different kind of modal or modality for you to interface with what you were doing, right? Because you now have your hands full. Maybe you can't even use voice because the baby's crying and it's not going to pick it up. So, like, that requires creativity. That requires the ability to explore these different directions to take. And I mean, this also reminds me when you talk about the fantasy stuff, is that some of the things that we now have today that are consumer products have come from movie magic, right? There's things that are out there that we're just like, okay, we're gonna have to figure out what this kind of experience would look like in the future. Like I think it was 2001: Space Odyssey had a video call in it, right? Now we're doing one right now, right? And it's stuff like that. I talked. Well, I didn't actually talk. I was in a small conference in New York last year where the final speaker of the conference was not a person that you would normally see in product design or tech. This person was a special effects or visual effects supervisor on Marvel movies. In fact, he was talking about how his team developed the sand table in Black Panther. But before that, he was explaining about like 2001: Space Odyssey, where the movie had to design what that interface looked like. So does that mean that we might get a sand table, right, in our living room? Maybe, maybe, right? I mean, and you can even imagine if you just take a moment to think, wait a minute, a sand table would be really helpful for X, Y, and Z reasons, right? Just to like be able to, I don't know, set the table easily and have different tiers of things. I could see the turkey easier or whatever that is, right? Like something like that could be really beneficial if we could make it a product, but we would have never maybe even considered that if it wasn't for seeing it in the movie, right? So the exploration piece is really, I think, a powerful kind of selling point admittedly. So that's incredible.
I think we can take a lot of knowledge and learning, especially from like these designers of these user interfaces in Marvel movies. Like if you look at any sort of movie UI, one of the things that's really interesting about them that you often miss as you're watching it is that every user interface dynamically adapts to the context and the data that is being presented to the user.
Mhm.
Now, that's a necessity for the movie so that people at a glance can understand what actions the main character can take. If you look at, for example, the original Iron Man movie, you see like Tony Stark like in his basement, and the user interface is changing around him as he is doing things. The hope in the future, I think, is that we get to a point where UIs are dynamic and they feel living and they actually adapt to the things that you're doing in every single context.
Yeah.
So no matter what thing I'm doing, I have the UI that has the actions that I need exactly at that point in time, no matter what thing I'm changing. In addition to that, I think it's also to your point around these like omnimodal interfaces. If I lose access to my keyboard, I want it to quickly adapt to that. But I still, along the way, want to maintain the visual consistency so I know that I'm in the app that I want.
Mm-hmm.
And so maintaining that brand language across those omnimodal designs that adapt to context is, I think, really the future goal that we're all trying to aim towards. And I think this is just one part of that long-term vision.
Yeah. Now, knowing this, and I agree with the dynamic interfaces that are adapting to our users. If that's the case, then what is this requirement for designer exploration, right? Because if you have that model that says, okay, the user is just going to have their own interface, and I've talked about this on the show a couple of times because I'm still grasping what that might mean. But for your particular case, and building a tool that is meant for a designer to go through different scenarios, different side quests, when the finer goal is really maybe the user's not meant to see any of them because it's not specifically for that user. So how would a thing like Diff UI fit into that future?
I think it really is about how long it takes you to explore. Exploration, I think, is always going to be a part of the flow. Now, early on, I think what you're doing is you're defining your brand language, and that'll always be an element that is defined early on. You go and you explore, you take influences, you create your mood board or whatever. Once you lock that in, I think we're getting to the point where we can dynamically generate things that are inside of that brand language.
Mm.
And the larger the corpus of data is for samples in that brand, the better the outcomes will become subsequently. So I think over time, you actually build it up so it is fully dynamic, but that actually takes some time, some input early on. The other thing, though, is I think exploration can happen immediately rather than right now. It still takes us some time. But if you look at this, the time required to explore is dropping faster and faster and faster. early on, it was, okay, I'm going to go as a designer, I'm going to take a week or a month to design a bunch of options for this. Now with things like LLMs, it was like, oh, well, it'll take me, 10 to 20 minutes to basically design one option. Now with Diffusion, my end-to-end latency is around 90 seconds. I think in the future, that's going to drop even further, and that trend is going to continue to where, if you're using this interface, you can say, hey, actually give me a hue slider over here if you don't mind, and it'll just pop up in your brand style. And I think we're going to get that to a point where if it's under 5 seconds, that expiration time will be seamless in the UI itself. Where it's just like, no, that's not it. No, that's not it. No, that's not it. That's the one. Perfect. Lock that in. Cool. And that'll be the entire expiration aspect. So you're actually like building this world around you in a much more magical way at that point in time, even though the expiration is shortened down to that 5-second interval.
Yeah. You mentioned Teams also, that you just launched that situation. And I think the question that I'll have there in the Teams thing is that I've largely been seeing folks work individually with these models, right? It's just me and the model in a room cranking stuff out, right? So I haven't seen a lot of collaboration with this. Is that what you're expecting from this team or enterprise model that you just launched? Is that part of it?
Yeah, good design teams design together is what I would say. And I think this is one of the most powerful things that Figma did, is they provided that like interactive canvas where everybody could jump in.
Yeah.
We have like design crits are a regular thing across pretty much all companies, and they're a regular thing for a reason, which is that when you work on an individual feature or subset or whatever that you're doing, you get laser focused on it, and you get some like blinders around like things you hadn't considered because you're staring at it for so long.
Right.
Getting that fresh perspective, I think, is such an important aspect of the design process. As an example, I was redesigning my sidebar as like a primary navigation interface. And man, it was hard as like a sole designer not being able to go out and ask people on my team, because right now it's just me, of like, hey, what do you think about this? Hey, could you review this? Hey, could you look at this? Because I think having that interaction with other designers, other humans, other people to get their perspective is still a really important thing. So even if that exploration is quick, I think we're still going to have these design crit moments where we come together as experts in our field, especially at a single company, to say like, hey, no, as a recommendation, you probably don't want to do that because of XYZ. Now, the cool thing about these like team-based canvases and with things really increasing in speed is previously design crits, you left some comments and you were suggesting, hey, you may want to consider X, Y, and Z. Now with this, what you can do is you can just be like, hey, I generated X, Y, and Z. Let's review these now as well. And here you can understand visually what it is that I'm suggesting. So that's the thing that I'm really trying to achieve with this kind of team enterprise thing, is I think it's still important to come together as humans and review with each other. Because if you remove the human aspect out of it, like, what are we even doing?
Like I said, we're in a room with an agent, and just arguing it for a few hours until we're run out of tokens. I think that's basically what we've come to, I suppose, right?
And that's why I think designers right now are having like one of the worst times in AI of any other profession.
Yeah.
We're just in this really strange point where we've gotten out of that review process. We've gotten out of using models that are made for design. We've gotten out of being designers, and that's something I just want to bring back.
Hell yeah. You know what? That's a great way to end on this thing, I think. So I know we talked a lot about Diff UI in here, but plug that certainly. But anything else that you would like to plug for the folks at home to let people know where to find it and where to find you?
Yeah, diffui.ai is the URL for the site. Go check it out. When you sign up, super easy. There's nothing else in there. I drop you right into the canvas with $5. You can play around immediately. There's no sign up or anything. Just go play. Give it one shot if you can. If you want to follow me, Twitter is where I'm most active. Twitter /ponies is my username. It's a really old gamer handle, but it's still what I use. PWNIES, because I spell it like an idiot. But that is where you'll find me online and where you can interact with me. Or just send me an email, j@diffui.ai. And I'm more than happy to chat at any point in time.
Hell yeah. Well, Jay, thank you so much for being on the show. Really exciting stuff. I'm actually really motivated to take a look at diffusion models based on, again, the work that I've done, certainly. So I think there's some ways in there. So again, thank you for coming on the show and tell me about it.
Donnie, it was an absolute pleasure chatting. I really
Super.
appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank you for watching today. And before you go, please help out the show by smashing that like and subscribe button just to get notified the next time that we go live. And feel free to continue the conversation. I'm going too fast, people, too fast. Feel free to continue the conversation on the official Design Systems Discord by going to discord.ds.house. Play nice in the comments, all right? And I'll see you on the next one. Bye.